profit motive is ruining your life in essentially every aspect imaginable, whether you realize it or not. Arguably the most important area it's ruining is your precious metal and the scenic avenue of metal YouTube. If you're in this space, you've probably seen or heard a bunch of shit about metal YouTube dying, etc. And if you aren't in the space, here's an hour-long rundown of all the hot, obscure internet niche tea. Just kidding, I don't give a fuck about going through that. Most of the largest metal-related YouTube channels barely scratch the surface of neither metal nor YouTube as a whole, and depending on your taste and preference, there's a good chance you've never seen any of these goofballs. Believe it or not, but metal, and especially extreme metal, is pretty damn niche, and before anything else, people in this niche just want to listen to some good shit. Funny skits, deep dives, analysis, or commentary is a distant secondary experience compared to the music itself. In other words, this whole YouTube area is a niche within a niche, a kind of social capital signifier within the scene that signifies your scenic cred based on the interactions you have within it, much like physical merchandise collecting and going to shows and zines, etc. Metal YouTube is just another scenic avenue available due to our particular technological circumstances, and serves the same purpose of proving our dedication to the unholy gospel of the metal.
Need metal in my life, just like an eagle needs to fly.
The current metal YouTube doomerism isn't based on one channel quitting, or one being a despised dickhead, or one complaining loudly. It's about a frustration with this particular scenic avenue, namely YouTube and its algorithm. The common sentiment expressed is how certain things are incentivized by the algorithm more. You know, drama, clickbait shit, the same old tired topics.
In particular, Mckenty stood out. Fast, ferocious, and unapologetic. It was a reworked version of Metallica's The Four Horsemen, a song Mustaine had co-written. By rebranding it under his name and speeding it up, he was sending a message. This was mine all along.
Politics, etc., and that different stuff gets kinda hidden. There's a harkening back to the good old days when everyone was more creative and could just do what they want and have fun, as opposed to today where it's just slop after slop and no one's creative and it's harder to get attention and easy to burn out. What happened? What changed? I don't think it's exactly a hot take to point out how a platform like YouTube isn't going to be exactly the same decades after its inception. As the user base changes and expands, the platform itself will expand. This isn't limited to YouTube. Look at music in general. What was once considered groundbreaking and original is looked at differently from the vantage point of hindsight. Additionally, we can look at memes. The olden days of Rickroll and Why You Know Guy are looked at differently compared to whatever the fuck the kids are up to now. Additionally, when your product is novel and in short supply, of course it's easier to make a living off of it like the very first YouTubers. Others trying to capitalize off of previous market exploitations isn't exclusive to metal YouTube. What is it about YouTube and the algorithm, the music industry, and all the way down to the broad metal scene that incentivizes certain things over others? What causes the oversaturation of broad spectrum and digestible content slop? What forces us to consider our channels in terms of a business and worry about ad revenue? What makes us sacrifice our artistic integrity in service of making a buck? What breeds ruthless competitiveness and rewards shallow trend hopping while punishing creativity? Money, and greed. Okay, and what is the structure of society based on money-making and profit-maximizing called? That's right, capitalism. Let's take a second to clearly define capitalism to avoid any informal miscategorizations. Capitalism is the structuring of economy and the society therein in pursuit of optimizing profits. It can be clearly identified by the presence of markets, wage labor, and the private ownership of the means of production. I know that last one can trigger some people, so in other words, it's when someone at the top owns something and receives all profits accumulated, whether it be a guitar factory, a university, or a video production studio, and that relies on paid workers to perform the labor required to make a profit, i.e., wage labor. Let's relate that to YouTube first. There are markets in the form of different audiences, of which companies and moneyed interests advertise to. There is wage labor in the form of the content creator, being paid to produce the content that makes profits for companies getting their ads seen. And all of this is privately owned by YouTube and Google, controlling the means in which the product is made, in aims of making as much profit as possible. Metal YouTubers, akin to early oil prospectors tapping a vein or whoever the fuck made the first radio,
Guglielmo Marconi,
originally had a vast market to exploit, and due to the creators being small in number by comparison, earned a significant portion of the pie, despite of course the ownership making the lion's share of the profits. As time goes on, more and more creators attempt the path of making it big, while the market exploitation becomes more and more extensive. We come to the point now where metal YouTubers are a dime a dozen, most attempting the same strategies of market exploitation their forefathers did, and therefore creating an oversaturated field of laborers, with their labor value decreasing as their product increases in supply. The private owner of the means of production, YouTube, isn't a corporeal being making their demands known personally via a nagging coffee breath boss or construction site foreman, but rather a series of code rigorously designed to attract as many eyes as possible to advertisements for as long as possible, and thus designed to extract as much profit out of the market as possible. This is the algorithm. For metal YouTube, the algorithm has been fine-tuned to incentivize certain videos over others based on the amount of advertising it gets to show its market, and therefore the amount of profit it can make. This means that a channel like Mckenty, attracting the attention of many hate watchers as well as his own fans and a number of, shall we say, normies, being attracted to relatively normie topics like, popular bands and shit, gets incentivized by the algorithm. Nick Fuckternal, another channel that created videos directed towards a more normie audience, metalcore being broadly more popular and content-brained, as well as a channel that receives a good amount of hate attention, similarly gets algorithmic attention. This is kinda unfortunate in that we see how the most prolific channels gain traction, and many will follow suit, contrary to capitalist myths of relentless innovation exponentially rising to the top. We rather see hordes of copycat market exploiter wannabes trying to make it big, just like that one guy he saw on the internets. This is a win-win for the private owners, attracting limitless labor while taking advantage of the tiny minority who actually develop algorithmic favor. None of this is to say the only shit out there is garbage and all anyone thinks about is making money. There are plenty of people genuinely doing what they want to do and who view profit as an afterthought. And there are plenty of audience members who appreciate that, and in turn creates a highly democratized community, metal in particular, being quite fringe and conscious of authenticity, has a history of being relatively democratized as a scene. This is partly why we see just some dudes ranting off the cuff in front of a wall of CDs. It's a scenic signifier of authenticity, a dedication to the metal. Related to this, there's something to be said about how shitty content just isn't going to attract an audience. Except mine, of course. You have to create shit of a certain quality to gain attraction regardless of incentive. But that doesn't take away from the system and algorithm itself that incentivizes profits and will punish you via algorithmic shadow banishment. No matter how big you make it, or how much enjoyment you attain, your boss will always be the algorithm. And your audience's authentic satisfaction will always come secondary to eyes on ads. To those in it for the love of the game and don't really care about getting thousands of followers, it doesn't really matter too much. Lots of us are okay with just throwing your shit out there and not expecting much. And especially in extreme metal, there isn't much attention to expect anyway. Now think of the larger, literal music industry. We see big and famous musicians who've made it, and based on that apparent success, countless others attempt to emulate it. Little is said of those who don't make it, and even less is said of the private owners making it the most with the least amount of effort performed, leeching off of the artist's creativity and protected by the system of production itself. Musicians are incentivized monetarily to create music that can make the most profit, and if they don't, good luck in the underground, bucko. This is all well and good until you consider how, in capitalist society, money is required to survive, adding another dimension of necessity and desperation to these pursuits. Why is the desire to make it big even existent? What about reality makes the 1 in a million star gamble the most desirable avenue in life? How desperate, miserable, and hopeless must life and society be if hollow profit-seeking is the pinnacle of it all? Or we can look at sports. Professional athletes are rich and famous, and millions of people attempt to reach that same level by risking life and limb, despite the chances being extremely slim. And much like famous musicians, even if they end up making tons of money, they still are beholden to a boss that makes even more without performing any of the profit-making labor. Athletes must perform in certain ways and adhere to certain standards of their employer, and if they don't, get ready to learn Chinese, buddy. What we're seeing in metal YouTube, and the metal scene as a whole, is a frustration with the realities of the profit motive, imposed on us by a ruthless owning class who couldn't give two shits about the spirit in your music or the fun, silly content you prefer to watch. If it ain't profitable, it ain't worth it. When something like AI-generated metal bands become hot topics, and understandably outrage metal fans, it isn't because they're simply outraged at technology or the literal sonic sounds themselves, but rather the absurd lack of authenticity being brandished upon the scene, expecting this market to eat it up to at least some degree because, well, you guys really liked all the source material we stole from to make it. The sheer lack of authenticity, respect for the scene, and art itself outrages those very much into music, and especially metal fans, of whom base a significant amount of effort in performing their faithful duties to metal. Why does AI-generated music exist and get propagated as a product to consume in the first place? Primarily, it's due to the profit motive. How much money can you make getting good at an instrument, writing music, finding bandmates, mixing, mastering, rehearsing, performing, and releasing music? That's a lot of work for, especially in extreme metal, very slim monetary reward. Rather, you can leech from others' work and crank out unlimited albums under unlimited pseudonyms until some shit finally sticks to the wall. The desire to make it in our capitalistic society rationalizes such shenanigans, and this kind of behavior is heresy to those most dedicated to metal, understandably outraging most metalheads, although maybe not entirely conscious of the impact the profit motive has on it. AI-generated shit has the potential to make a respectable profit, but does that make it valuable? Why is value and worth attached to the prospect of profits? Just like in metal itself, there is a thriving metal YouTube underground doing plenty of different things, and in my opinion, more comfortable with the fact that everything they do doesn't have to be the ultimate pushing of the envelope in pursuit of algorithmic or industry favor. There are just as many, if not more, people doing wacky things with guitars and drums and basses, sharing deep-cut bands and albums, delving into lore and history, analyzing deeper meaning within artistry, and connecting it to an expanding horizon of experience. Just because your particular brand of 2010 epic lameme shit isn't popping off like it did in 2010, doesn't mean there aren't those doing interesting things beneath the well-trodden surface. I've talked about it before, but despite metal evolving over the decades, and today there is a vast range of styles and popularity levels, it still primarily draws from its nostalgic golden age, or more recently, its nostalgic nu metal era. There are novel attempts now at experimentation and whatnot, but similar to other art and subcultures in our era of depressive hedonia under capitalism, we seek a comfortable escape in the form of the familiar, perhaps to harken memories of a past where shit wasn't so terrible and All that mattered was a video game or your CDs or some shit. This is further incentivized by, you guessed it, the profit motive, making callbacks, nostalgia bait, and lookalikes far more attractive and thus more profitable. Moneyed interests recognize the profitability in the familiar, and thus we see the proliferation of the familiar, due to the profit motive. You can argue that something different can shake things up and make more money, but why put up with all that risk when you have a plethora of safe options to rehash and remaster? And especially now with AI language learning modules, who needs to do all that bothersome work? This can be described as a race to the bottom, where instead of market forces incentivizing better quality products to stimulate growth, the moneyed interests themselves recognize that skimping and cutting corners is the true way to maximize profits. Price of burger go up and quality go down. The metal equivalent of race to the bottom socioeconomic theory is TikTok or Instagram bands blatantly ripping off 80s or 90s musicians and selling it as a vibe, or stale, by the numbers, fill in the blank core, or most recently, and most vile, AI generated metal, stealing the creations of others just to pass off a recognizable aesthetic or vibe in hopes of making a quick buck. In our digital age where the online becomes reality, this obviously makes itself most known on social media platforms, including YouTube. And again, all of this is just a digital avenue of metal scene participation. We have to ask why our fulfillment is associated with monetary success. Why is enjoyment of music and the scene therein not enough? What you should be more outraged by is how all of us are beholden to a corporate overlord, exploiting our creativity and enjoyment to force people to look at advertisements for beef sticks or Dick's Sporting Goods, etc. We didn't get 2 lengthened, unskippable ads due to divine will. We got it because the capitalist profit motive. We didn't get a proliferation of drama slop bullshit and AI Big Four rehashes about how, OMG, Dave said what about Metallica? Because that's just how it is. The capitalist profit motive incentivizes and rewards that shit. Finn Mckenty said it right to our faces. He did it for the money. Fuck you, I got mine. Deuces, chumps. We didn't realize why someone like that could do what he did, or why he did it. We instead called him as an individual cringe, and not a Chad, and moved on to lamenting the metal YouTube space as a whole. You cannot complain about capitalism and refuse to acknowledge how capitalism is the problem. Those in control of this structure want us to lie down and give in and be apathetic. They want us to blame ourselves instead of the system of power itself. They want us to be satisfied with slop and drivel and resigned to nothing better or more meaningful. They don't want you to love art for art's sake. They don't want you to find fulfillment beyond a quick buck. And they don't want you to stop making them money. None of this is just some greedy individuals or an inherently good system being taken advantage of, or corporatism or crony capitalism, or that one group of people that I know I'm gonna get a fucking shit ton of comments for. You know what I'm talking about. Or whatever other deflective muddying of the waters being propagated. It's how the system operates by design, almost poetically by the fact that it's not an individual responsible, or even a small group of individuals, but an algorithm created on purpose to separate human connection from human creation and make profit extraction even more optimized. It's the inevitable result of the capitalist profit motive, just as AI-generated content is the consequent inevitable result when the content mill needs as much slop churned out for the least cost possible. When all is said and done, and this system is extrapolated, there will be no purpose for metal or metal YouTube or even humanity in general. This system feeds on the exploited in service of the exploiters. And when the exploited can no longer compete with a cost-effective alternative, they'll be tossed aside into nothingness. We must instead seek an alternative to this system, one where artistic expression is appreciated as such and not as a profit-making tool, where community is based on common interest instead of common hate or apathy. As long as this destructive and exploitative system remains, an alternative will remain necessary, unless you're okay with the trough of slop before you. Here's the part where you channel your inner cold warrior and accuse me of being the communism and how it never worked and X, Y, and Z. I never mentioned the word communism until right now. I merely explain the problems and contradictions present in our capitalist society and how it affects this niche community. Socialism and its end goal, communism, are one alternative to this capitalist society, the other being Mad Max. As long as the problems of the capitalist profit motive exist, there will remain a need for an alternative. We can have a society where profit isn't prioritized. Think of the possibilities for art and metal in particular if the profit motive is eliminated. Why must it be beholden to a machine that only cares about how many dollar bills the art can get grinded up into? Think of your most enjoyable experiences at a music venue, a gallery, a festival, etc. I'd reckon the best of those times came with profits as an afterthought, just living in the moment, appreciating the music, energy, and community. And the worst came with profit-seeking, intruding where it's not welcome. Why put up with this unnecessary and soul-crushing apparatus of money-making? And doubly, why defend it as if you benefit from it at all? Unless you belong to the absolute top of the hierarchy, of which even with all the riches in the world, you still suffer from the curse of mammon and the ever-growing soul void. You exist to serve your owners, who grow richer every day off of your back. Arguing the merits of socialism is a conversation I'd be willing to have, but in no way can you reasonably defend the current system from a position of servitude. There is an endless list of rhetorical self-preservation stratagems that have been drilled into our brains when confronted with the problems of capitalism and the profit motive. It's deemed the only system that works, even when millions are homeless, starved, or starving, in an age of such opulence. We put up with it because of its mysterious essence of innovation and productivity, even when the innovations include billions spent on advertising, crypto, planned obsolescence, and genocide, and the most productive get the least reward. The entire discussion around this topic is treated as if every opinion has a say, and that we need fair discourse and not to fall into echo chambers, etc., without truly grasping how only one tiny group of people actually has a say, and how all institutional power is in the hands of their own echo chamber, completely insulated from whatever plebeian dipshittery you think is the marketplace of ideas. Even then, why are echo chambers treated as blanket phenomena, equally as bad as each other? Are all opinions just as good or as bad as every other opinion? Is preferring to listen to an objectively correct opinion and discarding the wrong opinions, let's say about evolution existing, as bad of an echo chamber as those preferring the opposite? What can be done to change someone's wrong opinion if all opinions and views are given equal weight? Who is responsible for such a disastrous muddying of the waters and the individualistic self-masturbatory inclinations so rampant in society? In large part, the owning capitalist class, tricking us into thinking we're all special little boys and girls with precious opinions, and that this matters somehow against the full weight of their own interests, and dominating our very existence is responsible. But they're protected on top of a distant spire, far away from the wasteland they cultivate below. The right opinion in the marketplace of ideas is as right as the amount of money behind it. Additionally, lumped together with drama slop content is the nebulous category of political content. Obviously, I have skin in the game here, but to whose benefit would a lumping of all politics together as some dumb mumbo-jumbo serve? Whether you like it or not, those controlling the levers of power wield immense political control over most aspects of your life, including what you watch on your grease-covered YouTube machine. It's no coincidence that the right wing of our political establishments seek to entrench these current power structures and preserve the dynamic of domination over the public. The muddying of the waters surrounding politics only serves this conservative interest by way of blurring the boundaries of what politics actually is. You can spend all the time in the world lambasting the woke left or even both sides, but ask yourself who actually wields institutional power And how would a vastly powerful and influential billionaire react to statements like these? Most likely they wouldn't give two fucks, or maybe they would chuckle at just how easy it is to trick a dummy like you into thinking the middle is anywhere even close to what separates you from them. Individually, the political power you wield and the material interest beneficial to you, compared to the wealthiest, is as distant as the Andromeda Galaxy to Lemmy's rotting mole. Where is the middle ground there? Does it even matter to deduce that? If disillusioned with these contradictions, the encouraged path is apathy and resignation, get-what's-mine ruthlessness, and willful ignorance of what could be done to better your own material and spiritual conditions. Your consolation is a consumerist wonderland, available to purchase with whatever crumbs you have left after purchasing what you need to survive.
You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice.
Capitalism offers the consumer an endless supply of commodities, conveniently absorbing everything in society that we find value in, arbitrary or not, and attaching a price tag to it. This supply includes things originally intended to dissent or rebel from the system, including metal, which is not immune from the all-consuming force of commoditization. Metal itself encountered these problems over the course of its evolution, starting as social poison, achieving mainstream success, submerging itself back in the underground, and till this day, attempting to stay ahead of the commoditizing forces ever seeking its markets. The owning class doesn't want to get people into the art of black metal. It wants a black metal aesthetic to sell and attach to a Funko Pop. It doesn't want the most extreme riffage possible. It wants to trademark the riff. It wants your art on its terms, the terms of the market, the terms of profit, and if that's embraced or apathetically allowed, you might as well make a YouTube video lamenting the death of not metal YouTube, but the death of your soul.